hello, everybody, and welcome to this episode of the Classroom Matters podcast with me, your host, Kristy Houle, where we dive into the hottest topics in education. Today, our guest is Tom Speicher. Tom is an award-winning writer and video producer at Pennsylvania College of Technology and is the author and co-author of 2 books. Co-author of Bucky Deacon's Dilemma, which is for young adults, and my personal favorite, A Week with Waffles, which is an illustrated children's book based on Waffles, the guinea pig. Tom has also written for NFL-related publications and websites devoted to the Minnesota Vikings, crafting features on countless legends and Hall of Famers. Welcome to the show, Tom.
Oh, thank you so much, Kristy. It's wonderful to be here.
Okay, so that's a lot of different things that you have done. And I know I only mentioned a couple, but I know that you were really into sports writing, doing tons and tons of writing and sports publications. And now we have a children's book about a guinea pig. So 2 completely different worlds, Tom. So start by just telling us a little bit more about your background and how you sort of jumped into this world of writing.
Sure. I actually went to college for broadcast journalism, and I wanted to be a play-by-play sports announcer on the radio. And I did that a lot through college and afterwards. And I was pretty good at it, but not great, and really not willing to make the sacrifices to be great in that field. And I got more into writing. And when I went to graduate school, I was working at various newspapers. And eventually, I got hired out of grad school where my present employer at Penn College in Williamsport. And back then I was running the radio station and teaching broadcasting courses. Eventually I moved over to the public relations office and then really got more into writing. And eventually that job morphed into video production as well. And the writing just sort of took off. I love doing features on students and alumni. And as you mentioned, a lot of freelance work in there as well with the Minnesota Vikings. But eventually I thought, hey, it would be cool to do something a bit different. And a few years ago, one of my mentors passed away, and he had a manuscript back from the 1980s, Bucky Deacon's Dilemma, as you mentioned, a young adult novel. And he never got it published. Back then, of course, there weren't the publishing options that we enjoy now. When he passed away, it still bothered him that he never got it published. So then I got the idea, why don't I get the original manuscript, spruce it up, make it more like in the 2000s, I guess you could say, because it was funny going through his manuscript, talking about the rotary telephones and stuff like that. Of course, there was no social media, etc. So the family gave me the original typewritten manuscript. I spent a long time rewriting, updating it, and got it published, Bucky Deacon's Dilemma. And it was fun, a fun experience. And then I thought, wouldn't it be neat to do something for children? And I had a colleague at my employer, Penn College, who wrote a book about her son who was blind. And she had it illustrated. It's called A Miracle Named Mason. It's a lovely book. I actually did a story on her for my employer, Penn College. And that's what really sparked the idea that was, I think spinning around up there to begin with. Hey, why don't I do an illustrated children's book? And who better to do it on than the guinea pig Waffles, who my daughter picked out many years ago and I still had. And she was coming up on, about 10 years old at the time. So I contacted the illustrator that my colleague used with this idea of spending a week with Waffles. She loved the idea, sent her the manuscript. She said, yes, I want to illustrate the book. And off we went, and it got published last year.
Yeah. So I love Waffles, and we talked about this a little bit. I've read the book a couple of times, and the cool thing about A Week with Waffles to me, as a former educator, 2nd grade, 3rd grade, an elementary school administrator, and then also a homeschool mom with children who we just loved reading books. The greatest thing, about A Week with Waffles is it's not only a really fun, cute story about Waffles, the guinea pig, but it also really sort of sets a tone for schedules and routines and all the different things that Waffles is doing, on a daily basis on his calendar. And so talk a little bit about how that sort of came to life and how you came up with those ideas and were inspired about it, sort of implementing the whole routine and calendar into the week that Waffles was having?
I wanted the book to be fun and educational. And I kept thinking about, well, what's a fun way to make it educational, if you will? And then I thought, well, why don't we just break it down and pretend Waffles has a calendar for her weekly activities? And that's how it all started. And it took me a couple hours to map out each day, just in very rough terms. And it just came to me that way. And I started thinking too about people and other animals I know. All the characters in the book are real. They're based on real people. My girlfriend Maria, my friend Wilson, all the animals in the book that I think it's on Saturday that Waffles plays with, those are all pets of people who are very important to me. So it was natural to include all those elements in the story. And I just thought, at that age range that the book is geared to, the emerging reader, they can have some reinforcements of the days of the week, and also bring in that planning part of it, as well as the questions. Everybody who's read the book has told me they really appreciate the interactive nature of it, because each day leads into a question that the parent or whoever's reading it to the child can ask, and then the child will go off on who knows where. It's fun when you go to a preschool and read the book to them and you have a page and you ask one of the questions, you get 15 kids shouting 15 different answers.
Yeah. Yeah. And do you think that, you're talking about going into schools and going into preschools, and I know that a lot of schools have class pets. A lot of those happen to be guinea pigs. A guinea pig is really an ideal pet for a younger child, right? They're sort of easy to maintain. And so they seem to be a popular.
Yeah.
We don't have guinea pigs in my hometown, but I do know a lot of people that have them. And so is that sort of what you were trying to do with Waffles? Were you trying to really connect that character in the character development piece of the story with something that children could really relate to?
Yes, definitely. That's a very good point. And I wanted it to be different than, I love dogs and cats as well, but everybody does stuff with dogs and cats. So I thought the guinea pig would be somewhat unique.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you get a lot of great feedback from kids? Impact on how much they love Waffles, and like stories, or like how it really sort of has touched kids after they've read your book?
Yes. And the parents too, especially, they tell me how much they appreciate the fact that it encourages creative thought in their children. And one gentleman was telling me his son insists on reading it every night, and this went on for like 6 weeks straight. So I'm sure the father was pretty sick of the book by then. But and it's fun too when little kids who've read the book come up to me. It's almost like they're afraid to approach me, like, "Oh, you're real. You're in the book. You're in the book." And that's funny too. And one time I did a Zoom with it was a second grade class. And I did it from home, and Waffles was, of course, there. And when I was able to lift the real Waffles up to the camera, the kids just went, they went crazy. They were actually like reaching toward their camera, wanting to pet Waffles.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's what makes this story so special too, is that every character in the book is based off someone in real life. Waffles is was a real guinea pig, where they could see it and touch it and look at him and really know that they're reading a story about a real animal. And so your inspiration for that, you kind of just talked about people in your life and things like that. So when you're talking to kids, and a lot of folks that are listening to this are teachers in elementary school who are teaching the children the process of writing. And that's sometimes hard to do with young children, right? So what are some techniques or strategies that you had during this process of writing as someone, kind of new to writing children's books, that you would give to teachers to try to help inspire their kids to really want to write some creative stories?
What's been really helpful for me is not panicking when writing. I think sometimes we sit down to write, and I think it's true of kids too, that you feel like you can't put anything on the page and that's not perfect. And let's
Yeah.
face it, nothing in life is perfect. And sometimes that can paralyze you. I know as an adult, it happens a lot. So what happened to me was I hate looking at a blank computer screen. So that led me to take out a legal pad and just start writing on the legal pad in longhand. And that really helped. I didn't worry about the quality or the exact wording, but I was getting the thought out. And then after a couple pages, I would look at what I wrote on the legal pad and then type it into the computer. It was so much more relaxing, so much more enjoyable because I wasn't starting from scratch, so to speak. And
Mhm.
then after a few chapters or pages are on the computer, you can go back and massage it the way you want. And I think I think that's really a key is just write. It doesn't matter if it's not perfect. It doesn't matter if it's gibberish for that matter. Just write, and then it becomes much easier.
Mhm. Yeah, and that's a really good point when you're talking about teaching younger children to write, because it does sort of paralyze them and they're kind of thinking, oh, this has to be perfect and it has to be a finished product. And so you were sort of able to get over that. But what was your experience like as a young child and writing? Did you have good experiences? Is that sort of where that passion grew, like from early elementary age, or was that something that you sort of got a grasp on as you grew older?
Yeah, I had an interest. I remember, in fact, I think my mom still has the clippings. In elementary school, we had a school newspaper. So I was the sports writer for the school newspaper in elementary school. And so the interest was there. I remember in middle school, in English class, writing longer stories. That sort of waned a bit in high school. I did work for the school newspaper in high school, but they weren't really long stories. And it just came to me, I think, later in life, writing features for magazines, and especially with the Vikings. I was writing like 2,000, 2,500 word features on these former players. I did that for several years. And so that's where the love of longer feature type writing developed.
Mhm, mhm. Do you think that there's a myth thinking about boys versus girls in schools, in elementary school? Do you think there's sort of a stereotype or a myth that boys don't enjoy writing as much as girls do? And, I've heard that sometimes from other folks that I interview or just being in a classroom myself thinking, oh, well, boys don't really seem to want to write. And I have 3 boys myself that never
Oh,
really
wow.
love to write. So do you see that as being a myth? And if you think that it is, like, why do you think that is? And you obviously didn't have that. You love to write at an early
Yeah,
age.
right. And I think the perception's also there that boys don't like books as
Yes.
much as girls do as well. And I had, when the Bucky Deacon book came out, because it's geared mostly to boys, I had
Mhm.
some parents tell me, thank you. Thank you for writing a book that my middle school son can read, because there's a dearth of books out there for that age group. In the right environment, I think boys can enjoy writing and reading in elementary school just as much as girls.
Mhm. Yeah. Do you think it has anything to do with the process in which we put in front of them to write? Because you said in the right way, if
Yeah.
we introduce writing to boys in the right way. So what do you think that would look like?
I think, and that applies to girls too, but I think having them write about stuff they care about. I
Mhm.
remember what got me started in elementary school for that newspaper, and I used newspaper in air quotes. It's like a news.
Right. A lot of kids aren't sure what a newspaper is anymore, isn't that
Yeah,
sad?
that's right. That's right. They let me write about what I was interested in. So I wrote about the National Football League and the Vikings, even back then as a third and fourth grader. And so I think that's very important that if you're going to ask them to write or put them in a position to write, have them write about something they're passionate about. It could be a sport, it could be a family member, it could be a pet.
Yeah. Yeah. And do you think the grading aspect of it, if you're asking children to write about something they love about, you think they're just so worried about their grade and how they're going to do and how they're going to be looked at. And so maybe taking that away from it a little bit?
Yes, I think that's very important. When I taught, it was at the college level, I hated grading. I really did, because I hated assigning value to somebody's effort. But I think if there wasn't so much emphasis on that, that would make it a much freer, enjoyable aspect for children. Obviously, you need to point out to them mistakes or whatnot for learning objectives to be met. But not telling them right from the get-go, oh, well, you're a C writer or you're an A writer, just let them write.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I have some of the same memories of just writing and being very scared,
Yeah.
right? That it wasn't going to be exactly right. And I know kids these days are a lot more vulnerable now to their feelings and like sort of talking about things that are personal to them because of all the peer pressure and things that are happening with kids in schools now. So I think that's sort of a deterrent as well.
I can tell you something real.
Yeah, go
It's
ahead.
kind of funny that in college, mind you, this is in the mid 80s. I'm, aging myself here, but whatever. I had a professor in college say, never end a sentence with a preposition. And I was like, what the, who comes up with these things?
Yeah.
And it almost made you fearful to write
Mm-hmm.
because am I going to get marked down because I end a sentence with a preposition? Just like I remember in high school, we were told you can't begin a sentence with but
Right.
or and. I don't know, maybe you had the same experience.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. A lot of rules.
Yeah. And I take pleasure today in my job and in the Waffles book, what have you, in breaking those rules.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, I think that's a really good point, and you were talking about like just having a legal pad and brainstorming. And so there really is no one perfect method to the process of writing, right? There's lots of different ways that if kids are wanting to write or if teachers are wanting to teach writing, or even if teachers, I know there's a lot of folks listening to this Tom that are probably like, I'd like to write a children's book. But I just don't even know how to get started. I don't even know where to start. So what are some advice that you have for folks that are really wanting to pull out that creativity in themselves, but feel like they just don't have the time or the skill to do it?
It's funny, Kristy, that you bring that up because I've had so many people, I've lost count of people who have come up to me since, especially the Waffles book came out last spring. Oh, I want to write a children's book. What should I do? Can you help me? And my advice to them is always the same. I said, find something that you're passionate about. Don't overthink it and write. And after you have what you think is a story, then go back and let me back up a second. I think sometimes people go online, do web search, how to become a children's author. And there's, oh my gosh, you could spend the rest of your life reading that stuff. And it paralyzes them almost, or they spend all their time focusing on that rather than coming up with the story. So what I tell them is to write a story out and then find a mentor who can, or somebody who's done it before, who can look it over, give you some pointers, and then help you through the process. Like if you want to publish through Amazon. I was very fortunate that I had a great mentor, and his name is Paul Lally. He, long story short, he used to be the director for Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood.
Oh, wow.
And he's been the executive producer of a public television cooking show called Ciao Italia for over 2 decades. And I got to know him through my involvement with public television in another life. And he's written about 4 or 5, maybe more than that, historical novels. And he helped me along the way. And he was the one who really pounded in my head, don't worry about the publishing aspect. Don't worry about this. Don't worry about that. Just worry about writing your story and have fun with that. And then the rest will come. But the rest will come much more easily if you have somebody there who can help you.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's really good advice, especially to adults that are wanting to write books, that are struggling and think, oh, I just don't have time. It's just little pieces here and there until your story is complete.
Yes. You don't have to. I think some people think they have to lock themselves up in a hotel room over a weekend and come out with an award-winning story. It really doesn't work that way. Just a little bit at a time is fine.
Yeah. Yeah. So, we talked a little bit prior about how, and I don't remember if we were actually recording or not recording at this point, but we did sort of talk a little bit about how I feel, and I don't know if you agree with this, that we're sort of stepping back from having a lot of variety of good children's hands-on books in the classrooms and reading stories, back in and I won't say any dates either, so I don't want to age myself, but way back in the late 90s when I was teaching, it was so normal for us as teachers to literally be reading books aloud throughout the day, all day long. We would have story time. We'd sit on the carpet and we'd read to the kids, and we'd walk around and read books. And I feel like that's kind of like not happening as much anymore in the world of all things, instruction and assessment and testing and all these things. So how important is it, being a children's book author? How important is it for children to have these books in their hands every day in a classroom, reading and just falling in love with characters and stories?
I think it's vital because I'm sure your experience as a teacher, the kids look forward to that time. They relished that time. They wanted to hear the stories. They wanted the books. Around here where I live in Williamsport, Pennsylvania, the local library is a great one. They have something called the Bookmobile that goes to the area schools, and the kids can come out and pick out a book, which is wonderful. I think that there is too much emphasis on, the assessment, the testing, and that really a portion of the day should be set aside just for that, just for reading. And not only reading, but discussing what you've read, I think is also very important. My niece, who read the manuscript for the Waffles book, is a first grade teacher in the Richmond, Virginia area. So that helped as well. And I know from her experiences just how challenging it is for all educators, because there are so many mandates that they have to meet. And at the same time, they're playing all these different roles for these kids.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And if you think back, I know that you can think of some books that you fell in love with as a kid, right? Your favorite childhood books. And, I have my favorite childhood books, and our kids probably have their favorite books that really kind of helped mold who they were going to be. And it, obviously if we pull away from that, then we're sort of doing our kids a disservice. But Waffles is a great example of just a fun, sweet little character that kids probably grow up and be like, oh, remember that was one of my favorite books, Waffles, the guinea pig.
I hope so. Yeah, definitely.
And so is that sort of something that you want to leave with this book? Like what impact do you want this book to have? Most people don't get into this for making $1 million. Right. We all know that.
Yes.
I mean, hopefully you will, but that's not why most authors write a children's book. So, talk a little bit about what you want this impact of this book to be, or just any of your writing that you may do in the future as well.
Right. I want this to be the first of several Waffles books, actually. I have 2 other ones. One manuscript is done. I'm just waiting I can't really give the details right now. And I have a good idea for the next one. So I'd like it to be a series, throughout the years, at least for a little while. I just wanted to bring joy to kids and to make them smile, and also to make the parents smile as well. And at the same time, learn something. And I think when I get pictures sent to me from parents or others who are reading the book to young children, it makes my day, because what's better than that? I know, I think my sister sent me a funny story a couple of months ago about her friend has the book, and the 2 kids fight over it. Who's going to read it before they go to bed? So, and that gave me a good laugh. So I just want to leave, kids with a smile on their face, really. And the other thing I thought was important to point out too in the Waffles book is that Waffles is an only child, so to speak, and that, you can still have a lot of love and joy in your life if you don't have brothers and sisters. You have an extended family, so to speak, of friends. So that was important for me to point out as well, because, there are a lot of only children.
Yeah. Well, and also with Waffles, when I read the book, it made me feel like, okay, this could really teach children how to take care of a pet and all the different things. So it has so many different aspects. It's got the routine of your day. It's got creating a schedule for yourself. It's got all, the fun character. It's got the only child. Plus it has these are the things that you do when you have a pet. He gets to do all these fun things. And I won't give away like what he gets to do every day of the week, but he gets to do some fun stuff with people that he loves. And they really have to invest in him and take care of him as a part of the family. So that's a great lesson with this book as well.
Yeah, I appreciate you saying that. And I want to also give credit to the illustrator, Marina Samuel, who I've never met. She's in Argentina. She's done about now 40 children's books. She's wonderful. incredibly a talented lady. And it was her idea actually at the end of the book to come up with the schedule. Okay, now it's your turn to plan your week, because we had some extra pages. And I thought that was masterful. I want to give her credit for that, coming up with that idea, because I do know some people who have the book and their kid has written in stuff for the weekly schedule.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point to sort of leave our audience with. Get your book, A Week for Waffles, because what you can do, teachers, is just create a whole unit around this book where your students are creating their schedule. They're comparing their schedule to Waffles. You're talking about their day every week. It's got a nice little blank calendar back there in the back. So there's so many fun things that teachers can do with this book that would tie into lessons that they're already teaching, skills they already want their students to know, and then their kids can do it with Waffles every day. So it makes it really fun. So I really appreciate the thought and the time and the effort that went into this book, Tom. And tell everybody where they can find you, where they can find a copy of their book.
Sure. It's easy. You can just go on Amazon and look for A Week with Waffles. And it's right there. It's $7.99 on Amazon, the paperback. It's also available in Kindle. Let me ask you this, Kristy. I find that kids don't want to read the Kindle.
No.
Do they?
No, they do not.
No,
they do not. They need in their hand, flip the pages,
Yes.
Look at the pictures. So I've always been an advocate of paperback books, hard copy books. Kindle, if you have to grab something really quickly, I understand, but no, definitely get a hard copy. And it's such a cute story. And folks that are listening, you also notice when you look at the Kindle version, you don't always get the full impact of all the pictures and the feel of the pages. And so, yeah, definitely a book in my hands kind of person with my children too. So yeah, if you're going to order, definitely order it. And it could probably be to a person in one day. Books are quick now on Amazon. It's like you order a book and you have it on your doorstep the next day. This is amazing.
Especially if you live in a major metropolitan area. Yeah. And I will mention too that it was great. I found out the other week that in Reader View's 2022-23 Literary Awards, it won a gold award for best preschool toddler book. And it also won the award for best children's picture book of the year. Yeah. Which is really a credit to the illustrator again.
Yeah. Well, it's a great book. I love it. For those of you that are listening, please go check out A Week with Waffles, get your copy, reach out to Tom if you have any questions or need any other resources from him. I know that he will be available. And Tom is also going to be doing an off-the-shelf segment for our Educate.Today author series. So please go to the Educate.Today website and check that out at the beginning of probably next month. So we'd be looking at May. So check that out with Tom, and I'm really excited about that. So Tom, thank you so much for being on the Classroom Matters podcast and talking to us all about the process of writing and the wonderful work that you're doing.
Oh, Kristy, thank you. It's truly been a pleasure.
Thank you so much. And this is Kristy Houle signing off for this episode of the Classroom Matters podcast.